Good morning, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the Mesa City Council meeting for May the 4th be with you of 2023. We'll see how many Star Wars references we can make today. We have council members Duff and Spilsbury out of town, and they are excused from this meeting. First item, everyone else is present. First item on our agenda is a presentation and to provide direction on the summary wrap-up of the fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget. Brian, good to have you back. Christy, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. My name is Brian Ritchell. I'm the Director for the Office of Management and Budget. Alongside me is Christy Griffin. She is the Operations Coordinator for the Office of Management and Budget. And we started this this journey in January, and today we'll end up with the May the 4th be with you on wrapping this up. And so, because I know it's been a long journey for doing the budget process. So as mentioned, we started with the council priorities in January and kind of worked through those and creating the annual budget, which the city manager's proposed budget was presented to you about 5 weeks ago on March 30th. And also we went over the capital improvement program. And then finally what we'll do is after the summary wrap up, coming in May and June, we'll go and do the budget adoption. So just to keep in mind when we go through the budget and even throughout the fiscal year, we keep these 5 principles in mind when creating the budget. And the general governmental funds is balanced net sources and uses, keeping the fund reserve for the 5-year forecast between 10 and 15. Keeping the services and programs that we have sustainable. Wages, a big one, is keeping the wages and benefits competitive for our employees compared to other Valley cities. And then also investment in capital and life cycle replacement projects. And similar to the general governmental fund, the utility fund has 5 principles also, with the balance of net sources and uses, 20% or higher reserve fund balance, and the rate adjustments predictable and smooth throughout the forecast. And then equity between residential and non-residential rates. And also a big one is keeping the utilities affordable. And as mentioned previously, a few weeks ago, the first 2, balanced net sources and uses and the 20% higher, we keep a good eye on that due to the inflation that has been happening and the costs of commodities increasing. So I want to briefly go over the budget themes that were presented in the proposed budget and just kind of recap some of those for the concentration of those 8 themes. First one was increasing public safety with 3 police recruit academies and 2 fire academies. But also we added 10 FTEs for fire to fill positions as the firefighters attending the 6-month paramedic training full-time. This was presented with the Mesa Fire and Medical Department presentation. Another theme was downtown safety. This was downtown police ambassador programs and cameras will be involved in this one. And then another theme was park security and engagement. With that, we would be adding park rangers, cameras to the parks, and also doing additional activities and programs in the parks to reactivate some of those parks. And then also the neighborhood cleanup. Collaboration between community services and solid waste will be expanding the roll-off service in neighborhoods. Increasing pedestrian access, that is a transportation one where we'll be having a new in-house concrete crew. This will help reduce the times for fixing safety hazard repairs in the sidewalks and gutters and things like that. Also, we have with the workforce development, the collaboration between the Education and Workforce Office and then also the Office of Economic Development with the Mesa Job Connect platform. Focused homelessness assistance and prevention with community services. They'd be creating an Office of Homeless Solutions, but also increasing support for housing voucher programs and the education marketing support. And then last but not least, the Trees Are Cool initiative. The community will be doing a bunch of community outreach and tree planting education and activities, but along also with that, which was presented to you with Parks, Rec, and Community Facilities, was adding a urban forester to the city with that initiative. So those are the 8 themes presented and some of the recap of that. What I wanted to go over too is also what was included in the 23-24 proposed budget are some of the departments that didn't present. However, the detail of these are in that the report that was attached to the proposed budget. It's the detailed report. So for instance, with the city attorney's office, the general fund is going to support the Victims of Crime Act or VOCA grant funding and move 2.3 FTEs from the grant to the general fund. Also included in their budget, they'll be hosting 2 to 3 paid interns throughout the year, which will hopefully contribute at least around 140 hours per year of work. And then within the city manager's office, a one-time funding is included for the Together Mesa Art in the Park program to bring art experience to each of the council districts, which this will also help like reactivate those parks. And then on code compliance, we added 2 additional code compliance officers, which are included for special events and increased after-hours service. A few more that are part of that report that didn't get to present one was fleet services. They are adding 4 FTEs, so 2 equipment mechanic 2s, a fleet technology coordinator, and then also a fleet asset manager. On water resources, this was presented to you guys with water resources. One big one is the lead and copper rule service line inventory, which was the EPA mandated regulation, and it requires the city to inventory all of those service lines to be completed by October 16th of 2024. And then the public safety, the PSPRs, or Public Safety Personnel Retirement System, in the budget right now, we have a $84.6 million capacity for the unfunded liability payment. That's that smoothed payment that we presented to you a couple years ago that we're still part of that plan. We'll be coming back here soon to kind of update you with that plan. And then also included in that payment, we use the Prop 207 or the marijuana tax revenue that is allocated to help support that unfunded liability payment. So a big part of the city manager's proposed budget in this budget wrap-up is recruitment and retention of quality employees. So what we're doing this year, we're doing a few things. One is a market adjustment. So due to the rise in costs and inflation remaining high, so for instance, in February, the Phoenix inflation was at 8.4%, while the national average was at 6.5%. So the Phoenix area has been higher the past year or two compared to the national average. So what the city will be doing is a 5% market adjustment for all employees not covered under an MOU agreement, effective the first full pay period in July of 2023. And then also what we're doing is city management and HR is continuing to evaluate for a benchmark adjustment. And what that is we'll take our pay ranges, the salary ranges, and compare them to cities throughout the valley, and then take a look to see, are we still competitive, or is it appropriate to increase those pay ranges to be comparable to the other cities. So the one difference I want to make is that for the market adjustment, all employees will be receiving a 5% pay raise, and their range will be moved up 5%. The difference between that and the benchmark adjustment is only the pay range would move up if it's appropriate when it's compared to other cities. So that was, I want to make a big kind of difference in there to where the market adjustment, everybody will get it. But on the benchmark, it's only those salaries after that, the ranges that may not be comparable to other cities will be moved up then.
Could you just clarify, benchmark adjustments doesn't mean additional funding compensation for employee, it just means the range moves up. So in the future, if someone's at the top of their range, they may not be eligible for a step pay. But if the benchmark says we need to have a higher minimum, a higher maximum, then the next year, or when they're eligible for a step pay, then they would receive something. So this is just to keep us competitive and keep those ranges moving up. The next slide we'll talk about, we are proposing a step pay also. That is available for eligible employees.
Oh, sure.
How often is that benchmark adjustment done?
So in the past, we've been doing this every 2 years for the whole city. And that was quite an effort to try to, I don't know how many different positions that was, Terry, but it was a lot of work. And the time it took, it oftentimes was putting us behind, especially in the last 3 or 4 years where the labor market has been so competitive. So HR's been working on a kind of a different plan where we've divided the positions into 3 different phases. Now this excludes public safety because they're on their own schedule. And so we're now rolling these out in thirds. And we've completed one, we're starting another one, and so we'll be able to get to these, we think, a little faster instead of having to wait a full 2 years to make those benchmark adjustments.
All right, so I know we've got the highest viewership of any meeting of the year right now because all 4,000 City of Mesa employees are trying to make sure they understand what's happening. And I'm not sure I quite get it. But
Let's go to the next slide
okay.
real quick because I think that'll help us put it all together.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so Mayor, Council, on the next slide, as the city manager kind of indicated, is that what we'll also be instituting is a step pay. We do this pretty much every year. We try to do this. So this year, it'll be up to a 3% pay increase for all eligible employees effective the first full pay period in July. So within the context of the market adjustment and the step pay, that employees, some eligible employees, will be getting an 8% pay increase starting July. So the market adjustment will move everybody up 5%. And then those that are still within that range that are not topped out can get up to a 3% step pay also. So those employees will, in fact, be getting can be getting an 8%.
Yeah, and so, Mayor, and thank you, Brian, I think for employees, annually, we've been pretty consistent about doing step pay. So everybody's familiar with step pay. That's a performance adjustment every year. During the year, employees sit down with supervisors, they establish goals. At the beginning of a year, there's a midpoint midpoint checkup where they review the goals and their progress, and then there's an end of the year final evaluation to determine whether the employee is eligible to receive a step pay. That happens pretty consistently every year. That's really what we're talking about here on the step pay. And so within a range, individuals can be adjusted up by the amount of the step pay. Oftentimes, employees who've been here for quite a while in that same position may eventually get to the top of the step. While they are doing great work, because they're at the top of the range, they may not be eligible for the step pay. But more than half our employees are every year eligible for the step pay. So that's consistently every year. What's kind of different this year is this market adjustment that we're proposing of the 5%, and looking at the impact and recognizing the impact of inflation, being competitive in the labor market, and recognizing we need to make those adjustments. Well, we're still doing the benchmarking adjustments also, but we just across the board, and talking with the other cities, and I met with most of the other city managers in the East Valley this week, and this 5% adjustment is almost universal across all cities right now. And I even Valley Metro yesterday in their board, in the meeting I was with, that's the proposals there. So I think from trying to be consistent across the valley with other local government employees, that 5% adjustment is pretty on par. Now, again, manage expectations. That's not something that happens every year. We've seen this as an extraordinary time period with inflation and competitive wages. So we'll make that adjustment this year. Most likely, traditionally, annually, we always talk about step pay as another way to recognize performance. So.
Okay, so let me kind of dummy it down to make sure I understand. 5% increase off the bat for everyone, just because we live in extraordinarily inflationary times right now. And then I know we usually do benchmarking every couple of years. What are we doing additionally are we doing more benchmarking this year, and instead of doing thirds, we're going to do the whole city staff
No,
all at once?
We're trying to get to them sooner, and so we've done some benchmarks. Sometimes we have to when we get way behind and we're recognizing we're losing employees for, it was last year or whatever, Mark, we were losing wastewater treatment operators because of all the new plants coming in,
Right.
the semiconductors, and so we kind of had to do some special or out-of-cycle reviews there. The goal is for us to keep rolling those through. Now is we're dividing the city and not waiting every 2 years. That's, my point was,
Okay.
we're trying to get to those sooner, and we've already gotten the first phase done. We'll probably get the other 2 phases done during the next fiscal year, and then next year, they will see the benefit of that in their ranges. But for most employees today, what they're gonna hear is, and we've kind of gone around, going around and meeting with all the departments right now and talking about this, but all employees will receive the 5% regardless of where they are in the range, whether they just recently rehired or they've been here for a long time and they're at the very top of the range. Everyone will be adjusted. Because what that tells us is our pay plan, we believe, has fallen behind 5% because of inflation. So we adjust everything up and just reset all our values up 5% across the board. The step pay then just takes, again, within those ranges and allows those who are eligible based on performance to receive the maximum of 3%.
Got it. So 5% for everybody, 3% if you're not maxed out and you're eligible for step pay. And then just reemphasizing our commitment to benchmarking to make sure that you're professionally, if you're not on a par with your peers other places, we
Right.
will recognize that and increase to reflect that.
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay.
That's correct. And then if we're okay with that, we probably, I think this next bullet point is a big deal, so we probably ought to,
So
Okay, do we need a
as-
drum roll or anything?
well, we might, but go ahead.
So the next bullet point is, yes, it was briefly discussed last week, I think when the Assistant City Manager, Scott Butler, was presenting. So what the city is looking to institute, and this is in the infancy stage of implementation, is a parent leave policy, management policy. So what that would entail is the first 80 hours of leave will be provided without a match requirement. So the city would provide 80 hours of parental leave. Up to an additional 80 hours will be provided by the city if the employee contributes an equal amount. So what that would entail is 80 hours, the first 80 hours the city would give that to the employee to take off for those first 2 weeks. And then any time after that, if the employee would like more leave, they have to match hour for hour up to 80 hours.
With their own time.
With their own time. So if they wanted to take another 40 hours off, they would need to use vacation or sick or any time leave for those 40 hours. The city would then match those 40 hours to be 80 hours. So this would be up to 80 hours. So a total max of time off that an employee would be able to take is 240 hours or 6 weeks.
And this will apply for newborns, foster care, and adoption. Am I missing anything, Scott? Yeah, those 3. So that's what this applies to. So we're working on the specific, logistics of policy, but the plan is to have this in place by the July 1 fiscal date.
Is that kind of an industry standard at this point? I
That's
kinda
what
lost
we've
track.
done. Yeah, we've went and looked at our peers to kind of see what their program was. So it's kind of a best practices of some of those, Scott. What would you say? Why don't you help us with that?
Mayor, Council, good morning. Yeah, Mr. Brady's right. We did look at what our peer cities are doing in the realm of parental leave, and it is, you see things all across the board, but I do think, Mayor, to your point, we can take pride in the fact that if council were to endorse this and put this into effect, that we would be on the cutting edge of Valley cities as far as paid parental leave. It's something that we heard loud and clear from our friends in labor as we were going through our negotiations with both police and fire, that was a priority. And And as we had those discussions, Mr. Brady wanted to make sure that that was something that, as an organization, we were investing in for recruitment and retention purposes. So to be able to scale this up citywide and to be able to have all employees take advantage of this, I think is a really big deal. And as Brian said, basically 4 weeks of paid leave now from the city. It does require a little bit of investment from the employee, but right now it's 100% on the employee. So the fact that we're able to step up and provide this, I think, is a big deal and will be, well received by employees throughout the organization.
I just have, so being new, can you tell me what is it right now?
Zero.
What is the difference?
It's
Okay.
all on the employee. That
It's
means
all
all
on
their
the-
leave.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. Mayor and Councilmember Goforth, you can use a variety of different, whether it's vacation or sick, there's also short-term disability and other programs that you can apply for to help new parents through that time. But right now, there's no time provided by the city.
Mr. Summers?
So I just want to make sure, is this going to be consecutive hours? So there are examples of other industries who allow you to use this throughout the year rather than doing it from day one to the final hour. So you start to nitpick which days you do. So is this going to be consecutive, or is it 240 hours of your selection throughout a calendar year?
Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Summers, we're working through that right now. You've hit the head-on discussion that we're having internally about how we can give flexibility to the employee while at the same time making sure that from a management and administration standpoint that we're able to balance that.
Right, and that was my follow-up, because it's I'd like to have that flexibility, but on the other hand, that could be a staffing nightmare, particularly in public safety.
Yeah.
Mayor and Councilmember Summers, you're exactly right, and you're channeling Terry Overby right now. So if she slipped you a note, I appreciate that. That's
I
exactly.
feel like I'm channeling the city manager
Yeah.
too, which is a little disturbing.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Though we're trying to work through that. We do want to give flexibility, and there's situations where we want to give a time frame so that if one spouse had stayed out with a child right after the birth and another spouse wanted to take time later, that we can build that in and give folks some time, while at the same time being able to, from a management standpoint and administration standpoint, have a little bit more certainty of those timeframes. So there's some best practices out there in the industry right now, both public and private, that Terry's been looking at, that we're trying to replicate. And now, since this will be a very popular benefit, we're going to work aggressively to try to get some policies in place, try to give some certainty to the employees. So there's a lot of work still to be done. We saw that in other cities too. After Phoenix rolled it out, they had to do kind of an interim step before they got to their final version. And we may have to look at something similar to that, because we know that if this were to go into effect July 1, that, folks want to take advantage of it, while at the same time we do have to get the meat on the bones as it relates to the policies and procedures.
Yeah, we need to do a little operations research on that and try to figure out how many people we can have off at the same time, and make sure that we have the capacity. I know in a prior discussion, city manager said we're trying to overstaff, particularly our public safety agencies, in order to accommodate these types of things like training as well. So if we have that staffing, that's great. I don't want it to fall back on like a mandatory overtime situation where this benefit is paid for by folks who are going to have to be forced to come to work after long shifts. So as long as we figure all that in, this is, I fully support this. This is a really good idea for families. Thank you.
Yeah, it's already been said, but I think this is a great idea. The goodwill that we're going to develop with our employees as a result of this, I think it's just going to really be a good investment for everyone in the city. So I'm glad to see we're doing this.
So those 4 items are part of the recruitment and retention of quality employees. The next slide shows changes to the proposed budget that was been presented to council. So these couple of items were discussed during the budget presentations by the department, so we wanted to just reiterate those that were changes after the proposed budget. So the first one is the increase in human services funding of $70,000, which is $35,000 for Mesa Promise and then $35,000 for Mesa K. And then also kind of the discussion that was with economic development of a quality retail attraction initiative, which would identify quality retail opportunities, but then also analyzing existing amenities, including retail, restaurant, and entertainment uses throughout the city, and then develop a plan for attracting those retail and restaurant opportunities.
Thank you. Mr. Summers.
Do we have a ballpark figure for the retail attraction initiative yet? What's our,
I think just
What's our budget
to
goal?
start off until we get further along was $100,000 for the consulting fee.
I like that.
So we're in
That's fair.
conversations with Arizona Restaurant Association president and talking to him,
Yeah.
and I've had some conversations with them, and he's, I think, going to help us kind of direct us about, how maybe the types of studies and the consultants that are using the private sector, and he's sitting on a national board, and so we're going to tap into him as a resource too to kind of direct us where right
That's
kind of
perfect. I've
consultants.
had conversations with
Yeah.
him too, and
So I think he'll be he is enthusiastic to, being a Mesa native, he's enthusiastic to help support us. in this.
outstanding. Thank you, sir.
So on the next slide, just wanted to kind of give a brief, a few projects, bigger projects that are included in the budget also, that we went over a few weeks ago. The City Hall, Council Chambers, Fire Station 223 at Lehigh, the Serine House, which was just presented a few days ago, the Neon Gardens, the major one, Central Reuse Pipeline, but then also the Flare to Fuel. So those are just a few of the big ones, big projects that are included in the budget for 23-24. So then adopting this budget, this sets the maximum expenditures the city can incur during the year. However, we do put in some capacity for contingency, just in case. It allows us for any unanticipated expenses that occur throughout the year, or also any unexpected revenues for grants that we may get. So we do put in a contingency for those. So the timeline for adopting the city manager's proposed budget on May 15th, we will be looking at the council take action on the capital improvement program, but then also taking action on the tentative budget. And then on June 5th, the council take action on do a public hearing for the secondary property tax, but then take action on the final adoption of the budget. And then on June 19th, we will bring forward the secondary property tax for adoption. And with that, that ends the budget wrap-up presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's go back to slide 8. I was in the public safety retirement system on our payment, and then the discussion on Prop 207, the marijuana tax. I was curious, how much monies do we receive from that? And is that the money that we receive in addition to the 84.6, or is that combined in that number?
So Mayor, Councilmember Freeman, so the first question is the Prop 207 revenues. We are estimating just over 3 million coming up this year. It's been creeping up, so it's been, I think last year was about a little over 2. This year we're looking at a little over 3. So that 84 million includes the Prop 207. So I think right now we have about 80 million in capacity that we've been putting in the forecast. And then on top of that would be the Prop 207.
Does that include the overpayment? I know we're making a little bit overpayment on that.
Yes,
So the 3 million is over the overpayment on top of the 80?
that is
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we scheduled the 80, and then this is addition to that. So it's just accelerating that pay down.
Pay down.
Yeah.
And so we're like, how many years into it now?
So we're, I think,
4?
3 years into it,
Okay.
2 to 3 years into it.
3 years out of 20?
20?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Good.
Of the accelerated payment.
Yeah, the way to say it is before we were kind of on the schedule that sloped like this and it kept getting more and more expensive out in the future. And we said, that just really doesn't work from the interest cost. So what we've done is we said we want a level payment, right? Well, it kind of like a mortgage, right? So we really have had to increase it. So, but it helps in forecasting because then we can just say, okay, we're just build it into the base budget and run it out through the forecast period, and that's what we're trying to accomplish here, so.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I just thought of that question, as well as all the,
And we'll be bringing, and when we come back in 2
In a
weeks, we
couple
have,
weeks.
by state law, the council has to review our
Policy.
on this payment. So I think in a couple weeks or 3 weeks, we're going to be coming back to you and going a little more detail on this too.
well, on a side note, it's an interesting scenario, the amount of marijuana sales that are happening in our city, obviously. And we have the same distribution centers. I mean, we haven't added any more sales centers, so not that I know of. But obviously, we're utilizing that tax for a purpose.
Yes.
And does that happen annually? I mean, is that not, that?
So the 207, that was part of the legislation, the conditions on which the marijuana legislation allowed to go through, is that
Right.
they would set aside, I forget what the percentage is of this collected, it goes to public safety, and the council made the decision that we would take 100% of that and put it into the paying down the pension
Okay,
liability.
so this will happen.
Yeah, so it
Yes.
it's just built into our system. As soon as that money comes in, it goes right into this fund.
So again, I fully support the market rate adjustment and as well as the step pay increase. And there's a lot of increases that can help our long-term employees as well as our new employees. And then the benchmarking is something we always do and have done for decades, and appreciate all the effort put into that. And the parental leave is extremely important. I've heard some angst from some employees. Why don't we do that now that we're doing it? It's a great benefit. So look forward to all that happening and playing out. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that we are not standing still as a city, that we want to get better. And so we've got these 8 areas that, looking at the way we do business, we've said, let's try to improve. And I endorse all of them: the paramedic training, the police ambassador program, the park ranger program, increased roll-off service, having our own concrete crews, the Job Connect website, homeless solutions department. Trees are cool. My compliments to city staff for saying, status quo isn't good enough. We're going to try to get better at things.
Well, but Mayor, it goes back to the council. Thanks for, it really helped to have those conversations early on. Hopefully you've seen, we've tried to, I don't know if we got 100%, but we've tried to at least, address a lot of the conversations. And those conversations at the beginning are so helpful for us to kind of guide us as we go through this process. So thank you.
Mr. Reddy.
On the secondary property tax levy, did we talk about that?
It's coming. We'll have, those presentations will be happening very soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then previously, the last couple of years, it's gone down actually, right? Or has it gone down last 2
As
years?
the tax, the rate's gone
rate
down, but
has
not the
changed.
levy, because
So-
because the average homeowner or value's
It's
gone
gone
up.
up.
So we've adjusted the rate
The
down
rate.
to,
Okay.
But we'll go into that conversation.
Homeowners too.
Yeah, more new development.
It's,
Yeah.
it's gone down.
Ryan Wimmer will be here pretty soon, and we'll have that, we'll go through that conversation
We'll go
again.
through that. Okay, perfect.
May I thank you for the strategic planning sessions we have at the beginning of the year to help facilitate all this. It's been very helpful. And obviously, staff listens, so I appreciate that.
All right, thank you very much. Look forward to a lot of boring city council meetings now that we're done talking about the budget, right?
That's our goal.
All right. Next item on our agenda is current events and conferences attended. It'll be interesting to see how we do this with Duff and Spilsbury gone. That's right.
Maybe you'll be the point of contact.
I left my phone in my car. So I can't remember what I did yesterday. Council, anything you'd like to share with us?
Oh, you have to talk about, yeah, there's something we have to.
done this early.
Yeah.
We can. Trust us, we've been busy.
Tomorrow, you can talk about yesterday, some of it. The speakers from yesterday should talk.
Okay. Yes, we did have annually, and thank you, Mr. Summers. Annually, we do have an event at the Mesa Police headquarters where we honor our 3 fallen police officers dating back over 100 years. So that's always a very poignant and meaningful ceremony, and we did that yesterday. So thank you for reminding me of that. Thank you to our public safety people who, it's not, as the point was made yesterday, that it's not a job, it's a calling. And these are individuals that really put literally their lives at risk every day for us. So that was a great event and an opportunity to thank them.
Community neighborhood or community services, we had an activity over the Idea Museum that you spoke at as well. That was very a great opportunity to meet all the neighborhood leaders. And then you were at Visit Mesa later that evening as well. You want to talk about that?
Thank you for reminding me of that too. Yes, we recognized we have over 6,500 volunteers that are part of the City of Mesa programs. And the way that we afford nice things in the City of Mesa is we fill the gap between what we can afford with our full-time employees and augment that with over 6,500 volunteers. So that is a big part of the Mesa way of doing things, is utilizing the very talented people in our community that are willing to donate their time and talents. And then Visit Mesa did host a national tourism industry event at the Mesa Arts Center the last, I think it was last couple of days. So that brought a lot of attention to Mesa.
Well attended.
Yes.
Big group.
It's good to remind ourselves occasionally how big tourism is to our economy. The sports tourism that occurs during spring training, obviously, but year-round is tourism is really important to us, and so we appreciate the good job that Visit Mesa does in attracting people to come to our community. Anything else we ought to point out for the last week or so? All right, thank you. Mr. Brady, what does our schedule of future meetings look like?
Mayor, we will see you next Thursday.
Sounds good. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? Thank you, Mr. Reddy and Mr. Summers. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned.